is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Tapscott. I'm giving a little intro here ahead of today's episode because the topic is something that has been changing minute by minute over the past week, and that is the ongoing saga at OpenAI. It's definitely been a roller coaster week for Sam Altman, who was the past and now present and perhaps future CEO of the AI giant OpenAI. Last weekend, the company's board shocked the technology world by firing Altman for no apparent reason. The move left Microsoft, their biggest investor, kind of reeling a little bit. And after failing to get him reinstated, the CEO, Satya Nadella, basically announced that they were going to be hiring Altman and a bunch of other people. This precipitated a massive company-wide revolt at OpenAI, with 800 people making it clear that they wanted Altman back. That's kind of where we got to on the episode. What's happened since is that by midweek, so Wednesday, it looked like Altman was going to be reinstated at OpenAI, accompanied by a whole new slew of directors, including the former Harvard president, Larry Summers. Now, this is a fluid situation. You know, in a day or two, who knows, things could be different. But the topic of the conversation today is something that we think has legs, which is regardless of the outcome here, if he goes back to OpenAI or stays with Microsoft, the question really remains, is this really the best way to be scaling the most important technology in a generation, perhaps ever? It's behind closed doors and smoky back rooms with all sorts of horse trading and accusations of wrongdoing with no clear or obvious evidence. We argue that it isn't, and that we think that there's a Web3 solution to some of AI's missteps from a governance perspective so far. So that's the topic really of the conversation. Just wanted to start with that brief introduction so everyone knew kind of where things were at with this episode. So thank you very much and enjoy the conversation. Take care. Bye. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. This is Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. Andrew, may we live in interesting times. November has been quite the month on the news front. Just in the past 5 days, we've had two big things happen. Number one is the drama around OpenAI. On Friday, several members of the board decided to act unilaterally to fire the CEO of the company, the charismatic and highly effective Sam Altman. Over the weekend, they tried to walk that decision back, but it seems as if by Sunday that the toothpaste was out of the tube. And by Monday, before market open, it looked like Altman was going to be joining Microsoft, which was the largest investor in OpenAI. And a lot of people were talking about how Microsoft was basically able to acquire all of OpenAI, which is to say all of the human talent and capital for next to nothing without raising any red flags. So that's where things stood on Monday. But even today, there's been some additional information that some of the investors at OpenAI are looking to find a path for Altman to come back, and that even Altman and even Microsoft might be open to that idea. I'm guessing that Microsoft is open to that idea under very different terms. What's been reported is that they would like to see the board resign, and they probably want to see the entire thing reconstituted so that their investment is worth a hell of a lot more and that they've got a lot more influence at the board level. So, you know, heads I win, tails you lose, I think, for Microsoft in this current situation. The other big piece of news, obviously, is that the Department of Justice has brought an action against Binance, and as part of that, they are agreeing to settle to $4 billion settlement, including a $50 million fine paid by CZ, the CEO. As part of this arrangement, he'll also have to step down as CEO and step away from the business in any capacity for several years. So this is an interesting piece of news for other reasons, namely what the impact is or lack of impact has been on the market itself. And I want to get into that too. But maybe let's start on the OpenAI front. So I summarized the events. What was your take on what occurred over the weekend?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one is it just goes to show you what people have been sort of saying for a while, that OpenAI's very bizarre governance structure, what was in a way kind of legal debt. Like people always say, like technical debt when you have bad code and you just keep building stuff on top of it, and eventually it sort of collapses the whole thing. This is the sort of legal version of technical debt, just in terms of like how they have this nonprofit foundation, which the board members reside on, which oversees this for-profit entity that has become essentially a $90 billion company. And it's kind of a weird governance structure just because one is the board has shrunk pretty dramatically over the years.
Yeah.
It's gone from, I think, roughly 11 members down to 6.
We should start just by telling people that OpenAI, I think a lot of people think OpenAI is some high-flying tech startup run by a founder CEO who's got a big stake in the business. But actually, it's this really convoluted thing that began as a nonprofit meant to fund research into AI. And some of like the original backers were people like Reid Hoffman and Elon Musk. And even Microsoft itself was involved at an early stage. But it has this very convoluted structure because it really began not as a for-profit company in the traditional sense, but rather as almost like a research initiative. And it seems like with the success of the business, with the success of the tech and the product, they've tried to like bolt on or graft on this, for-profit entity. And it's created this big, hoop show. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. And Sam was one of the co-founders. I believe there's 5 co-founders. And he sort of took over. He left Y Combinator to take over as CEO of OpenAI, I think 5 years ago. Since then, it's gone through multiple sort of iterations of its model. ChatGPT-3 was the one that sort of really took off. It was about a year ago. It's crazy how time flies.
Yeah.
And since then, it's become one of the fastest growing, most successful startups of all time. And obviously, Microsoft bought 49% of the company in sort of a combination of cash and GPU credits.
Yeah. Like basically, you got to run all of these models and train these models in computers, and Microsoft Azure has got like one of the biggest cloud providers. So it's basically like it's like providing free rent to an office to a startup almost in a way. It's like you get free space on our servers to run computations, and that has like a monetary value.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly like you said, Sam doesn't own any equity stake. So I think where a lot of this came from is Sam was raising money for a AI chip startup.
Yeah,
raising apparently up to $100 billion, which is just like a ridiculous amount of money. And I guess the board didn't like that. He wasn't, candid in his discussions with them. There's also like a theory that Michelangelo, I think his name's the CEO of Quora, who's on the board.
Yeah.
Michael D'Angelo, I think is his name. And he just launched some sort of competing product on Quora. So there's sort of like a conspiracy theory that he's trying to kind of nuke OpenAI a little bit because OpenAI was kind of competing with his own startup. It's kind of interesting that he's still a board member, given that every other board member throughout the years who had a competing interest has resigned. Most notably Elon and Reid Hoffman. But I'm not sure if that's true or not. I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories. But yeah, I mean, I think the sort of how does this relate to crypto? So 2 things. I think one is, first of all, it's kind of interesting that almost exactly a year ago, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried of crypto got taken down. Now the Sam of AI was essentially taken down as well.
Novembers are bad for Sams.
It's just a very, very weird parallel. But I think that's kind of just like one random thing. But the more important thing is, and I think you actually, I don't want to take too many of your words because I know you wrote sort of an op-ed on this, but it does go to show that decentralized AI is the answer. Like you don't want to have all of this, the world's most important product housed within OpenAI, and like just a random board coup could effectively implode the company overnight. That's just a crazy way for AGI to come alive. And so I think it really sort of goes to show you that we need decentralized AI. And I know you've spoken a lot about this. It's actually one of the hottest narratives right now in crypto.
Yeah.
The only problem is it's not like the infrastructure is not really ready for it because it's such a compute heavy type of operation, at least relative to something like DeFi. But it's something that a lot of people are starting to look at, particularly projects like Filecoin, which kind of provide like the almost like the decentralized compute or storage for potential decentralized AI companies to come alive.
Yeah.
There's also finally this idea that and this has been sort of a sci-fi idea in crypto for a long time. You could effectively have AI manage a DAO. So instead of having a DAO governed by humans, you could effectively create a pool of capital and then have an AI. Again, this would all require like a decentralized compute layer. You could essentially have like AI run organizations, an AI fund. But again, my personal take on this is just decentralized AI makes a ton of sense. And this kind of goes to show you why it's so important, but it's just the infrastructure is not quite ready. Is that kind of a similar read to what you had? I know you wrote an op-ed recently on this.
Yeah, I think that at various levels of the AI stack, there are clear and obvious Web3 implementations. And I think that what you just identified was even at the very basic like hardware cloud level. And this is a problem that has existed even within other aspects of Web3, which is that 75% of the entire cloud computing market is controlled by 3 companies. And those are the companies that are, among other things, where most of the data or most of these models are trained. But we have these we have these user-owned networks that own and are harnessing the collective power of multiple different servers and data centers and even individual computers. And we actually had those guys from the Render Network on recently, a couple of weeks ago, which is GPUs being used primarily for rendering, but could also be used for AI. And that's an episode I would encourage people to check out. But at other levels of the stack, there's other Web3 implementations. I want to pause for a second before diving into that, because I think right now this episode is, in a way, clarified what the choices are for how AI will scale in the future. I think until now, and I think for most people, there's basically sort of 4 options, right? I think a lot of people believe that the end result of all these backroom machinations will be to simply solidify an existing tech giant like Microsoft, who's going to be a big winner probably from the outcome, or that a reconstituted OpenAI will just look like a conventional Silicon Valley company with a charismatic founder CEO that will move fast and break things and just push the limits, under the guise of accelerationalism. And I know that that's something you believe in. Then there's also people worried that governments themselves are going to just throttle AI's growth through new rules and onerous regulations, or that doomers will win the day, and as a result, they're going to shape or alter public perception so that everyone sort of turns against AI before it even fully gets going. And my view, and like the whole point of this op-ed that I'm writing, which I don't want to say too much because I hope people read it, is basically that in a way, these are all kind of false choices. The real issue is one of governance over how we train, build, and ship these new AI products responsibly. And I do believe that it begins with decentralization and with openness and transparency. I just think it's a mistake to have such power in the hands of a single point of failure, whether, as I said from the outset, that's a disgruntled board that gets ideas about, firing the CEO or the CEO himself, or, a single investor with a huge stake in the outcome of this, or even potentially, and we haven't even got to this, like an authoritarian regime that wants to take over or co-opt this technology the way that governments in some parts of the world kind of co-opted Web to social media networks and use them as surveillance tools. So yes, you're right that there are definitely implementation challenges to making this a reality. Whether the technology, like the hardware, is ready for prime time. Could we use like DAO governance as a way to improve both the oversight and ownership, that the distribution of wealth from AI? Could we change the data paradigm so that instead of big companies holding all the data inside of silos, it's user owned and people decide how it's used and if they get compensated? And then at the application level, to your point about how we integrate, AI and blockchain together. I mean, in DeFi alone, there'd be a lot of really interesting opportunities to create an AI financial advisor that's able to help you, scour the different platforms, to audit the code, to make recommendations, and so forth, right? So at every single level, there's a convergence occurring, and it may be a hot narrative that AI and blockchain are, that blockchain and Web3 is the hot new, AI and Web3 are the hot new thing. But the reality is that actually that's what's happening. All of the most important technologies today, whether it's blockchains or it's AI or it's extended reality or it's robotics and connected devices, these things are not separate. They're related technologies. And my personal view is that in the same way that the term, internet went from describing a narrow set of networking technologies to describing a whole range of technologies and business models and use cases and cultural phenomena and social behaviors and all the rest of it. Like, I do think that Web3 is coming to represent this moment, or this period where these technologies are converging together. And yeah, I mean, I think that Sam Altman, as the charismatic hero CEO, maybe has lost some luster. It's really no fault of his own, I don't think. But this is what happens when we put all of our chips into the basket of charismatic individuals. And frankly, like, this is something that crypto knows a lot about too, because despite the promise of decentralization, I think that too many in the industry have fallen victim to the hero worship of people like SBF or even CZ. So lots to mull on right now. I mean, the situation is fluid. We could be talking next week and he could be back in position at OpenAI. But I think the event itself does put some of these challenges, hopefully, in stark relief for some people.
Well said.
Thank you. So what about CZ?
Yeah, CZ. I mean, the CZ news just kind of came. To be fair, the CZ news has been a long time coming. I don't think anyone was sort of overly surprised, at least from what the people I've sort of been tracking. It's always, I guess the biggest sort of news was the fact that CZ would have to step down from Binance for a period of at least 3 years. No one had, or at least not no one, but that was a sort of, that was more on the bearish side of sort of range of outcomes from people. Most people sort of assumed there was going to be a very large fine. I mean, $4 billion is that's got to be one of the biggest fines ever. That's got to be the biggest fine ever for a crypto company.
Definitely the biggest for a crypto company. I believe that it is the second largest ever, and the biggest. I think Facebook had to pay a bigger fine, and I think that it's the biggest ever where there's been culpability from like the CEO level, where the CEO also had to pay a fine. So
yeah,
not a great title to have. I don't think, but
I think, yeah, I think. I mean, I do think it's a good thing, though. So what's interesting is about 4 years ago. I mean, it might have been about 3.5 years ago. Very similar situation where we were in the sort of early stages of a bull market. And then Arthur Hayes, we had like a resolution with the sort of Arthur Hayes, who's the CEO of BitMEX, which was before Binance, the largest crypto perps exchange in the world. And I mean, they had no KYC procedures. Like, they were, I would say, more aggressive than even Binance. And sort of the resolution of that case, which had been an overhang on the market, was effectively, in a lot of ways, was kind of like the straw that broke the needle's back, or the needle that broke the camel's back, in terms of after that, it's just crazy. Like, we had just a complete nuclear up move because like one of the biggest bear cases had been sort of not just proven, but had at least resolved. And so I think that's actually a very similar situation what's going to happen here, where, of course, like, it's bad that that this happened, but at the very least, it's not going to be destroying Binance. There was also no allegations that Binance had been, misusing customer deposits, which had been a fear of a lot of people. Like, Binance could be the next FTX. So I think the fact that scenario was ruled out, the fact that he's not fighting this anymore, he's agreed to it. I think he's in Seattle today for sentencing. So I think that's all very good news. Yeah, I would just say it's kind of like one of the last big overhangs on the market. And I think everything's sort of lined up perfectly for sort of a Q1, a very strong Q1 with Bitcoin ETF, Bitcoin halving, and like we've always talked about, sort of the end of the rate hiking cycle. So yeah, I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, in the sense that the rumors have been in the market for months and maybe longer, depending on which rumors. And in a way, yeah, I mean, it's not good, obviously, what happened, and some of the revelations, unfortunately, about how the management team at Binance ran that business are quite damning. On the other hand, you're right that the worst didn't happen. And a lot of this was kind of priced in. And the fact that it's changing hands and that the new CEO is someone with deep regulatory experience, and the fact that the market is kind of eating this news without really doing anything, I think is a very interesting harbinger for what's to come. Because if the market can just chew through this, it'll chew through whatever news comes out. I think it will chew through whatever news comes out on Coinbase. Coinbase has basically been accused of, bad paperwork. So, if Binance is getting fined, then who knows? Coinbase could be just a speeding ticket or nothing. They could lose for that matter because, they're not necessarily guilty. Anyway, so I think that you're right. It's sort of like, okay, this is now off the deck. FTX is off the deck, the trial resolution on that matter. In fact, it even looks like FTX has got a lot of assets and might be making a lot of people whole, or at least, people clawing back a lot of their money. And now we've got all these positive catalysts and against this macro backdrop with tailwinds. Don't know, the future is not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. But I got a feeling going into next year that we're going to have a really constructive backdrop for the market. So
yeah,
we'll see, right? But I'm with you. It's like kind of turn the page and start a new chapter.
Yeah, I think like, again, like that was like one of the biggest overhangs I've consistently seen. Like the bear case, for the most part, has hinged on Binance being sort of the next FTX. So yeah. It really takes away. A lot of people also have this sort of, I don't know if it's conspiracy theory, but this idea that they weren't going to approve the Bitcoin ETF until they had cleaned up the space effectively. So in some ways, people think this sort of partly paves the way for the Bitcoin ETF as well, which is sort of, I think the next potential window is first week of January. So I think, just kind of adds to my growing bullishness for 2024.
You're a bull. You're a Bitcoin bull. I'm looking at my Bloomberg terminal, and some headline writer got this headline wrong. And the headline is Coinbase Global pleads guilty, agrees to $4 billion settlement in the DOJ probe. Just like Binance, not Coinbase. So fortunately, the market's closed, because otherwise, who knows what would have happened. And one other thing too, which is that, these things are all related, equities and crypto and so forth. So NVIDIA, which has been really the darling of this most recent AI boom, the company is, over $1 trillion and has been added to a new list called the Magnificent Seven. We keep changing it from FANGs to MAGAs, and now we're back to Magnificent Seven. Anyway, they just printed they just had their earnings came out, and they beat all their estimates, and the stock went down 5%, but now it seems to be flattening out, and who knows where we end up by market open tomorrow. By the time people hear this, it'll be ancient history, but it will be interesting if if things can continue on these earnings surprises, which we've seen, and the momentum can continue around the AI and tech thesis. You and I know that this will be good for the crypto space as well, because everyone who's invested in one is invested in the other. There's a wealth effect, there's a cycling effect, and I can see the correlations kind of coming back again. Right now, they have diverged a little because crypto has been outperforming stocks so much, but I think I can see it coming back together. So anyway, we'll see about that. Just some musings on the market. But great chat, Andrew. Nice to do this kind of roundup. I always enjoy these episodes. We will see everybody next week. Thank you very much for joining us. That's today's episode of DeFi Decoded. See you later.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.